For the last several years, the United States has expanded our approach to security on the Korean Peninsula. For example, deploying strategic assets to South Korea like nuclear-armed submarines, the restarted trilateral exercises and cooperation. And then earlier this year, it was already referenced, the U.S. and South Korea National Security Authorities announced the Nuclear Consultative Group, so our two countries could talk about deterrence strategies. I think this is a step forward in what we're doing, but Dr. Cha, I'd like to get your assessment of the NCG, and what do you see as the long-term benefits to the United States and to South Korea?
Thank you for the question, Senator. As you know well, the Nuclear Consultative Group was created out of the Washington Declaration to try to address concerns about the credibility of U.S. nuclear extended deterrence on the peninsula. Why do the Koreans have these concerns? As Jenny said, the train has left the station. North Korea really has ramped up their capabilities, again, 100 ballistic missile tests. And the NCG was meant to try to address that in a way that goes beyond the existing dialogues, like the KID, the Korea. There are several other dialogues, as you know, that take place, but this was meant to be a high level that provided more insight into U.S. nuclear planning. It's not nuclear sharing, but it's an important next step in terms of the U.S.-Korea military relationship, and I think a good one. Does it check the box in terms of credibility of nuclear deterrence? I think for the time being it does. But in the longer term, as North Korea continues to develop these capabilities, and as China also continues to ramp up their nuclear weapons capabilities through the end of this decade, there will be more questions that come up, both in Korea and Japan, about the credibility of our nuclear umbrella. So those are bridges we're going to have to cross in the future eventually, but for the time being, I think this was an important step that the administration took, and all for the better of the alliance.
So are there specific recommendations you have for the partnership that would make it more effective?
So one of the things, we at CSIS did a report on this, and one of the things that we suggest was taken up by the administration was more direct real-time warning sharing. But there are other things that we can consider. For example, one of the things I mentioned in my testimony is more cooperation between South Korea, Japan, and AUKUS in terms of not necessarily to supply South Korea with nuclear submarines, but just as a very specific example, Australian nuclear submarines, if they get serviced now, will need to go all the way to Groton, Connecticut. Meanwhile, in South Korea, there are world-class ports that could be nuclear certified, where they could do the work. They could do the work there. Same is the case for Japan, although there is a different attitude and norm with regard to nuclear weapons in Japan very clearly. Another, which we have suggested in the past, is not to redeploy nuclear weapons to the U.S. nuclear weapons to the Korean Peninsula, but to at least just begin a preliminary dialogue about what would be the infrastructure prerequisites if we were to consider something like that. Even beginning that dialogue at a working level, not at a high policy level, like at a working level, would also send an important deterrence signal, not just to North Korea, but in particular to our ally. As you know well, deterrence is about capabilities and intentions, and I don't think there's any of our allies in the region that doubt U.S. capabilities. But there are concerns about intentions, and these sorts of things, as I've just described them, help to send the right signal about the credibility of the U.S. umbrella.
The CCP has expressed concerns about this partnership. Do you have any concerns about them retaliating because of what we're doing with the NCG?
I mean, the type of retaliation I am most concerned about is not military retaliation, but economic coercion. When the United States put a missile defense battery in Korea in 2016, 2017, China carried out a campaign of economic coercion against South Korea that cost South Korea tens of billions of dollars. And as you know well, they've done this to many countries in the region. And so I think that is the most proximate threat in terms of retaliation. And of course, they would draw closer to North Korea as a result of that. But I really hesitate at the idea of thinking that if we don't do something to strengthen our alliances, that somehow China and Russia will then moderate what they do with North Korea. I don't think that's the case. I mean, they will continue to pursue a tightening of their relationship regardless of what we do.
So would you agree that when the CCP actually expresses displeasure about something, that probably means we're on the right track with regard to deterrence?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a reflection of that the signal is being heard and that we're on the right track, yes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ricketts. Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all of the testifiers for being here. I want to follow up on Senator Romney's